The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast metal ocean. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds filled the curved seats that rose in circles toward a domed ceiling painted with stars. The air hummed with translator devices, working overtime, turning alien languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the small podium reserved for humanity's delegation. Around her, the noise of a typical council session continued. The Kethvar, tall warriors with gray skin and sharp teeth, argued loudly about military budgets. Their voices boomed across the hall like thunder. The Mercanti, short beings covered in golden fur, chattered rapidly about trade routes and profit margins. Their high-pitched voices sounded like excited birds. In the highest seats sat the ethereal collective. These ancient beings looked like tall, thin shadows wrapped in flowing robes. They rarely spoke aloud, preferring to communicate through thoughts that felt cold and distant in other minds. When they did share their thoughts, it was usually to remind everyone how young and foolish the other species were. Sarah waited patiently. She had learned long ago that patience was important when dealing with the council. Humans had only been members for 200 years, which was nothing compared to species that had been here for thousands of years. The ethereals often reminded them of this fact. Finally, the council speaker, a massive creature with multiple arms and eyes like glowing coals, called for order. The noise slowly died down, though many delegates continued their private conversations. The delegation from Earth requests time to address the council, the speaker announced in a voice that sounded like grinding stones. Several Kethvar representatives didn't even look up from their war games. Tiny holographic soldiers fought battles in the air above their desks. Some Mercanti were busy with calculations on glowing screens. A few ethereals sent out waves of boredom that made nearby delegates yawn. Sarah cleared her throat and began to speak. Her voice was calm and steady, the way humans always spoke in the council. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she said, "I come before you today with an important announcement from the people of Earth and all human colonies." This got some attention, but not much. The Kethvar war games continued. The Mercanti kept working on their profit reports. After much consideration and debate among our people, humanity has decided to withdraw from the Galactic Council and all related galactic affairs. Now, there was some interest. A few delegates looked up. The ethereals sent out questioning thoughts that felt like cold fingers touching minds. Sarah continued, "This decision was not made lightly. We have learned much during our time as members of this great council. We have made friends and trading partners. We have shared knowledge and culture with species from across the galaxy." She paused, looking around the vast hall. Most delegates had returned to their own business. The announcement was clearly not as important as they had first thought. However, we have come to realize that our path forward lies in a different direction. We have philosophical differences with the current direction of galactic civilization. We believe it is time for us to focus on our own internal development and growth. A Kethvar general named Thokmar looked up from his war game. "Are the humans running away from something?" he asked, with what might have been amusement. "Did someone scare you?" Laughter rippled through the Kethvar section. Even some other species chuckled. Sarah's expression didn't change. "We are not running from anything, General Thokmar. We are choosing a different path. We believe this is best for both humanity and the galaxy as a whole." An ethereal's thoughts drifted across the hall like cold mist. "Perhaps it is for the best. Young species often overreach themselves. Better to withdraw and mature before attempting to participate in matters beyond their understanding." More laughter came from various sections. The Mercanti delegate Felnara waved a small hand dismissively. "Humans were never big traders anyway. Their loss won't affect the markets much." Sarah nodded politely. "We thank the Council for the opportunities we have been given." We have prepared a full report of all human commitments and how they will be transferred to other species or concluded responsibly. She activated her data pad, and information began flowing to every delegate's station. Lists of human research projects, trade agreements, diplomatic commitments, and military cooperation deals scrolled past on thousands of screens. Most delegates ignored the data. It seemed like typical human over-organization. Humans were always making lists and reports about everything. "We will begin the withdrawal process immediately," Sarah continued. "All human colonies outside of our home systems will be evacuated within 6 months. All research projects will be concluded or transferred. All diplomatic positions will be resigned with proper notice." The council speaker's multiple eyes blinked slowly. This is highly unusual. Most species give years of notice for such changes. "We prefer to act quickly once a decision is made," Sarah replied. "We believe this will cause less disruption for everyone involved." Ethereal prime consciousness. Zorthek's thoughts swept across the hall like an icy wind. The young ones think they can simply pack up and leave galactic civilization like children abandoning a game they no longer enjoy. Sarah looked directly at the ethereal section. "We do not see this as abandoning anything, honored Zorthek. We see it as choosing our own path forward. We wish only the best for all species in the galaxy." She bowed slightly, a human custom that many species found quaint. "That concludes our announcement. We will submit all necessary paperwork through proper channels. We thank the Council for their time and attention." As Sarah walked back to her seat, the hall erupted in conversation. Most of it was dismissive. The Kethvar thought humans were cowards. The Mercanti calculated how to take over abandoned human trade routes. The Ethereals considered it proof of human immaturity. Over the following weeks, the withdrawal began exactly as Sarah had promised. Human ships arrived at colonies throughout the galaxy. Families packed their belongings calmly and efficiently. Research stations were shut down or handed over to other species. Trade agreements were concluded or transferred. The process was so quiet and orderly that many species barely noticed it happening. Human colonies had never been very large or important anyway. Human researchers had always worked in the background, supporting projects led by other species. Human diplomats had been polite but unremarkable. Captain Vexthol of the Kethvar fleet watched a human transport ship leave the Kepler station. He had worked with human tactical advisors for 20 years, but he had never thought much about them. They had always been there, quietly doing their jobs, never making a fuss. Dr. Kulmora of the Ethereal Research Collective barely looked up when her human assistants submitted their final reports. Humans had always been useful for handling routine tasks that more advanced species found boring. There would always be other species willing to do such simple work. Felnara signed the papers, transferring 3 major trade routes from human management to Mercanti control. The humans had been managing them efficiently, but efficiency was easy. Any species could keep ships moving on schedule. 6 months after Sarah's announcement, the last human ship departed from Galactic Council space. It was a small research vessel that had been studying cosmic radiation patterns near the galactic core. The ship's final transmission was brief and polite. "Thank you for the opportunities provided during our time as council members. We have learned much and hope our contributions have been useful. We wish all species prosperity and peace in the years ahead." Then there was silence. The humans were gone, and galactic civilization continued exactly as it had before. The Kethvar planned their military campaigns. The Mercanti calculated their profits. The Ethereals contemplated the mysteries of the universe. Life went on, and hardly anyone noticed that something fundamental had changed. 3 months after the last human ship disappeared into the dark between stars, Felnara noticed the first problem. She was reviewing cargo shipments from the outer rim when her datapad started flashing red warnings. "What does this mean?" She muttered, tapping the screen with one furry finger. The shipping schedule showed delays spreading across 17 different trade routes. Ships that should have arrived days ago were still wandering through space, lost or running behind schedule. Felnara called her assistant. "Get me the logistics coordinator for the Centauri run." "Which one?" her assistant asked. "The human coordinator submitted his resignation 3 months ago. We haven't replaced him yet." "Then get me whoever is handling it now." There was a long pause. "No one is handling it, Manager Felnara. The automated systems are supposed to manage themselves." Felnara's golden fur bristled with irritation. She had assumed the humans had left behind their systems when they departed. All the computers were still running. All the scheduling programs were still active. But somehow, ships were getting lost. Across the galaxy, similar problems were appearing like cracks in a wall. On the research station orbiting Proxima 7, Dr. Kulamora floated in her meditation chamber when alarms began blaring. The station's atmospheric processing plant had shut down without warning. Emergency life support had kicked in, but it would only last 48 hours. "What happened?" she demanded of the station's AI. "Primary atmospheric processor offline," the AI replied in its calm voice. "Maintenance protocol 7 Alpha required. Then run maintenance protocol 7 Alpha. Protocol requires human authorization codes." Dr. Kulamora's ethereal form flickered with annoyance. "There are no humans on this station." "Correct. Protocol cannot be completed." She tried to override the system herself, but the controls were locked behind security measures she had never seen before. The humans had always handled mechanical problems. She had never needed to understand how the atmospheric processors actually worked. Emergency repair crews arrived from the nearest ethereal world, but they discovered something disturbing. The atmospheric processor was not just broken. It was designed in a way that no ethereal engineer could understand. The technology was advanced, but it followed principles that seemed almost primitive. Instead of using complex quantum field manipulators, like proper ethereal technology, the human design system used thousands of simple mechanical components that worked together. It was like comparing a symphony orchestra to a single powerful instrument. Both made music, but in completely different ways. "This is inefficient," declared Chief Engineer Morthek. "Why would anyone build something so complicated when a single quantum processor could do the same job?" But as they tried to replace the human system with proper ethereal technology, they discovered another problem. The quantum processor couldn't handle the specific atmospheric mix that Proxima 7 required. The human system had been designed for this exact environment, taking into account dozens of factors that the ethereals had never considered important. Meanwhile, on the military front, Captain Vexthul was dealing with his own crisis. The Kethvar had been planning to expand into the Vega sector, but something was wrong with their intelligence reports. For 20 years, human tactical advisors had provided detailed analysis of potential conflict zones. They had predicted political instabilities, resource disputes, and military buildups with remarkable accuracy. Vexthul had always assumed this was simple observation. Any competent officer could gather such information. But now, trying to plan the Vega expansion without human input, he discovered how wrong he had been. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we have 17 different reports about the Vega situation and they all contradict each other." Vexthul examined the reports with growing confusion. The Zonari claimed the Vegans were planning to attack. The Vegans claimed the Zonari were building weapons. The Nexus Federation insisted both species were actually working together against Kethvar interests. "What did the human analysis say about this situation?" Vexthul asked. His officer looked embarrassed. "The humans predicted this exact scenario 6 months ago, sir. They said the Zonari and Vegans would manufacture a conflict to force the Kethvar to choose sides, ultimately weakening our position in the sector." "And we ignored this prediction?" "We thought it was too complicated, sir. Human predictions always involved so many variables. We preferred simpler analysis." Vexthul realized he was facing something he had never expected. A situation where human simplicity had actually been sophisticated, and Kethvar sophistication was proving simple-minded. The problems were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. On Kepler Station, the main computer hub began experiencing cascading failures. Systems that had run smoothly for decades suddenly started breaking down in ways that no one could explain. Chief Systems Engineer Koltar had been trying to fix the problems for weeks, but each solution created 3 new problems. "It's like the whole network is connected in ways we can't see," he complained to his team. "Fix one thing and something else breaks on the other side of the station." His assistant pulled up the original system designs. "Sir, these blueprints are signed by human engineers. It looks like they redesigned the entire network about 50 years ago." "So? We understand computer networks." "Yes, sir, but look at this." The assistant highlighted connections between systems that seemed completely unrelated. "The waste management system is somehow connected to the navigation computers. The air recycling system talks to the cargo bay sensors. Everything is linked to everything else." Koltar studied the designs with growing amazement and horror. The humans had not just built a computer network. They had built an ecosystem. Each system supported multiple others, creating backups and redundancies that were invisible until they were gone. "This is impossible," he breathed. "How did they make all these different systems work together?" "I don't know, sir. But without the human maintenance crews, the whole thing is falling apart." The pattern was becoming clear across the galaxy, though no one wanted to admit it yet. Humans had not just participated in galactic civilization, they had quietly become its foundation. On Arcturus Prime, the planetary defense grid went offline, when a simple software update caused a chain reaction that no one could stop. The update had been installed automatically, just like thousands of others over the years. But this time, there were no human technicians to monitor the process and make tiny adjustments that prevented disasters. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries began experiencing navigation errors. The computer systems worked perfectly, but they had been designed to receive constant minor corrections from human operators who understood how real space travel differed from theoretical calculations. Even the universal credit, the galaxy's standard currency, began showing signs of instability. The complex economic equations that kept the currency stable had been maintained by human mathematicians who understood how different species' economic behaviors affected the system. 3 months after humanity's departure, emergency sessions were being called on dozens of worlds. The problems were still small, still manageable, but they were growing. In the Galactic Council chambers, where humanity's absence was marked only by empty seats in the smallest section, delegates were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. "How many of these malfunctions are connected to human systems?" asked Councillor Threndock of the Altarian Republic. The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that no one wanted to acknowledge was spreading. "Surely it's just coincidence," declared ethereal prime consciousness Zorthek. "Young species cannot be responsible for maintaining advanced galactic infrastructure." But even as he said it, reports were coming in from across ethereal space. Research stations losing life support, terraforming equipment shutting down, deep space monitors going silent, and in every case, the trail led back to systems that humans had quietly maintained, improved, or designed. The galaxy was discovering what Earth's children had always known: the most important work is often the work that no one notices until it stops being done. 1 year after humanity's quiet departure, the galaxy was no longer quiet. The Universal Credit crashed on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Financial markets across thousands of worlds watched in horror as their primary currency became worthless in the space of 6 hours. The number that represented all galactic wealth simply started falling and would not stop. Felnara stood in her office on Mercanti Prime, watching her life's work disappear. The golden displays that usually showed her vast profits now showed only red numbers getting bigger every second. Around her, other mercanti were crying, their golden fur darkened with stress hormones. "How is this possible?" she whispered to her financial advisor. "The stabilization algorithms," her advisor explained in a shaking voice. "The ones that kept the universal credit stable during market panics. They were maintained by human mathematicians." "So get other mathematicians." We tried. The ethereals sent their best economic theorists. The Kethvar assigned their tactical calculators. Even the silicon mines offered their processing power. And the mathematics are too simple. Felnara stared at him. Too simple? The human algorithms use basic principles that any child could understand, but they're applied in ways that create incredibly complex results. Our experts keep trying to improve the system by making it more sophisticated, but every change makes the currency more unstable. Across the galaxy, the same pattern was repeating in 1,000 different ways. The more advanced species tried to fix human systems by making them more complex, the worse everything became. On the military front, the situation had exploded into actual warfare. The Kethvar and Mercanti fleets were locked in brutal combat over the Vega sector. Ships burned in the void while their crews died for resources that neither side actually needed. Captain Vexthul floated in the medical bay of his flagship, his gray skin marked with battle scars. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed in a war that should never have happened. "How did we get here?" he asked his tactical officer, who was missing an arm from the latest battle. "Without human mediators, every dispute became a crisis," the officer replied. "The Zonari convinced us the Mercanti were planning to blockade our trade routes. The Mercanti convinced their people we were planning to invade their colonies. Were either of those things true? No, sir. But without the humans to help us talk to each other, we just assumed the worst about everyone's intentions." Vexthul closed his eyes. 20 years ago, human advisors had prevented a similar conflict by simply arranging meetings between the opposing sides. They had asked simple questions like, "What do you actually want?" and "What are you afraid of?" And somehow, those simple questions had revealed that most conflicts were based on misunderstandings. "The humans made it look so easy," he said. "Maybe it was easy, sir. Maybe we're the ones making it hard." But the worst crisis was spreading across the outer colonies, where the Zephyrian plague had returned from 50 years of dormancy. Dr. Kulamora materialized her ethereal form in the emergency medical facility on Tau Ceti 4. Around her, beings from dozens of species lay dying on medical beds. The plague attacked the nervous system, causing victims to lose control of their bodies before death came as a mercy. "Status report," she demanded. 14 colonies affected so far," replied the medical coordinator. "A 6-armed hexapod whose natural immunity made her useful in plague zones. Infection rate is accelerating. The old vaccines are completely ineffective." "How is that possible? The Zephyrian plague was eliminated decades ago." "No," the coordinator corrected. "It was controlled. Human biochemists developed a vaccine, but they updated it constantly as the plague virus mutated. They never eliminated the disease, they just stayed ahead of it." Dr. Kulmora's ethereal form flickered with frustration. "Then we'll develop a new vaccine. Ethereal medical technology is far superior to human biochemistry. They tried for months. The greatest medical minds in the galaxy applied their most advanced knowledge to the problem. They created vaccines that were marvels of biological engineering, using techniques that humans could never have understood. Every single vaccine failed. The Zephyrian plague continued to spread, killing millions, because it was not behaving according to advanced medical theories. It was following simple biological rules that the sophisticated vaccines could not account for. The human vaccine was primitive," Dr. Kulmora told the Emergency Medical Council. "It used weakened versions of the actual virus to train immune systems. Any species could have developed such a basic approach. Then why didn't we? Asked Dr. Ketmore of the Andromedan Medical Institute. The question hung in the air like a toxic gas that no one wanted to breathe. Meanwhile, automated alerts were screaming across the galaxy as deep space monitoring stations went dark. These stations had been watching for asteroid threats, solar flare warnings, and other cosmic dangers. Most species had ignored them as examples of human paranoia. On the ethereal homeworld, senior observer Tal Veth received an urgent message from the outer system monitors. A massive asteroid, nearly the size of a small moon, was approaching the inhabited zones. According to the message, it had been detected 3 months ago, but the automated systems that should have calculated its trajectory and alerted authorities had been offline. Why wasn't this reported earlier? Tal Veth demanded. The monitoring station requires constant recalibration, his aide explained. The human technicians used to adjust the sensors every few days to account for cosmic radiation interference. That's absurd. Proper equipment doesn't require constant adjustment. The human equipment was designed to be sensitive enough to detect threats from much greater distances. The constant adjustments were the price of early warning. Tal Veth watched the asteroid approach. With 3 months' warning, they could have deflected it easily. With 3 days' warning, they might still be able to evacuate the threatened colonies. Send emergency fleets to begin evacuation, he ordered. Sir, that will require cooperation from Kethvar transport ships and Mercanti cargo vessels. Then arrange it. Sir, the Kethvar and Mercanti are at war. They won't cooperate without mediators. Then get mediators. His aide looked uncomfortable. Sir, the humans were our primary interspecies mediators. Without them, most species refuse to work together, even in emergencies. For the first time in his long life, Tal Veth felt something that ethereals rarely experienced. Helplessness. The asteroid struck Colony 47 in the Altair system 3 days later. 2 million beings died in the first few seconds. The colony had been successfully evacuated, but only because a young Mercanti trader named Quintal had volunteered to carry Kethvar refugees, breaking his species' trade embargo to save lives. As Quintal watched the asteroid destroy the world from his ship's view screen, he remembered something a human trader had once told him. The universe doesn't care about our politics. Rocks fall down whether we're friends or enemies. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions had become the normal routine. The Great Hall was half empty as species withdrew into isolationism or became too busy fighting each other to attend meetings. Council Speaker Morden looked out over the chaos with his multiple eyes and felt ancient beyond his years. Representatives were shouting at each other in languages that the translator systems could no longer handle properly. Even basic communication was breaking down. Order, he called, his voice grinding like breaking stone. We must address these crises systematically. What's the point? Snarled General Thokmar of the Kethvar. Every solution creates 3 new problems. Every fix breaks something else. It's like the whole galaxy is cursed. Ethereal prime consciousness. Zorthek's thoughts swept across the chamber like a cold wind. Perhaps this is what happens when primitive species are allowed to integrate themselves too deeply into advanced civilization. They become a weakness that spreads throughout the system. Then why didn't we notice the weakness before? Demanded Felnara, who had lost most of her fortune in the currency crash. It was a question that no one wanted to answer, because the answer was becoming impossible to ignore. The humans had not been a weakness in the system. They had been the immune system, quietly identifying and solving problems before they became crises. And now the galaxy was discovering what happened to a body when its immune system simply walked away. In the vast emptiness where human space had once been, long-range sensors detected nothing. No ships, no signals, no trace of where humanity had gone. They had vanished as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind only empty colonies and unanswered questions. The galaxy was learning to function without them, but the lessons were written in the blood of wars, the dust of destroyed worlds, and the tears of species who had never realized how much they had depended on the quiet competence of their most unremarkable neighbors. 18 months after humanity's departure, Dr. Kulmora made a discovery that would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about the universe. She was investigating the ruins of a human research station on the dead world of Kepler 438b, when her scanners detected something impossible. Buried beneath the abandoned facility was technology that predated galactic civilization itself. "This can't be right," she whispered, her ethereal form flickering with excitement and confusion. The structures were massive, extending deep into the planet's crust. They were built from materials that her advanced scanners could barely identify, using engineering principles that made no sense according to current physics. Yet somehow, they were still functioning after millions of years. Her research team worked for weeks to access the buried facility. When they finally broke through the last barrier, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with technology that hummed with quiet power. At the center of the chamber stood a pillar of crystalline material that pulsed with soft light. As Dr. Kulmora approached it, the crystal suddenly activated, filling the chamber with holographic displays. The images showed the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, star systems that no longer existed, civilizations that had risen and fallen before the ethereals had even evolved, and watching over it all, a species that called themselves the Architects. "Who disturbs the memorial?" asked a voice that seemed to come from the crystal itself. Dr. Kulmora nearly dispersed her physical form in shock. I am Dr. Kulmora of the Ethereal Collective. We are investigating the disappearance of the human species." "Humans?" The voice seemed puzzled. "Ah, yes. The inheritors. They have completed their service and moved on as is proper." "Service? What service?" The crystal pulsed brighter, and new images appeared. They showed the galaxy as it was now, with lines of energy, connecting star systems in a vast network. Every inhabited world was part of the pattern, supported by invisible forces that kept planets stable, atmospheres breathable, and life sustainable. "The architects built this network before we transcended physical existence," the voice explained. "It requires constant maintenance by those who understand both technology and wisdom. For millions of years, different species have served as guardians." Dr. Kulmora stared at the displays in growing horror. "The humans were guardians, the finest we have ever chosen. They understood what others could not, that true strength comes from serving something greater than yourself." The images changed, showing human technicians working on equipment that Dr. Kulmora now recognized. The atmospheric processors, the deep space monitors, the economic stabilization systems. All of it was connected to the ancient network that kept galactic civilization alive. "But they were primitive," she protested. "Their technology was simple, inefficient." "Simple?" The voice sounded amused. "They maintained a network that spans the galaxy using principles of harmony and balance that your species calls primitive. They prevented wars, disasters, and extinctions, while taking no credit for their work. You call this simple?" More images flowed from the crystal. Dr. Kulmora watched human engineers secretly adjusting terraforming equipment on hundreds of worlds. She saw human mathematicians creating economic models that prevented market crashes while making their work look like simple accounting. She witnessed human diplomats diffusing conflicts by asking the kind of basic questions that exposed hidden truths. "Every guardian species eventually makes the same mistake," the voice continued. "They believe that because they can create complex technology, they understand complex systems. The humans were different. They understood that complexity emerges from simple principles applied with wisdom. Then why did they leave?" "Because it was time." The galaxy must learn to maintain itself, or it will never truly mature. The architects made the same choice long ago. We withdrew so that younger species could grow. Dr. Kulmora's mind reeled as she began to understand the scope of what humanity had been doing. The other species, we never knew. The humans made sure you never knew. They understood that gratitude can become dependence, and dependence prevents growth. They served in secret so that you would eventually learn to serve yourselves. The crystal showed her more scenes from across the galaxy. The current crisis was spreading, but some species were adapting. The young mercanti trader Quintal had started an interspecies rescue organization. A group of Kethvar officers were developing new peaceful conflict resolution techniques. Some ethereal researchers were learning to build simple, robust systems, instead of complex, fragile ones. Are they gone forever? Dr. Kulmora asked. No guardian species is ever truly gone. They watch from a distance, ready to help if the universe faces threats too great for younger species to handle alone. But they will not return to do the work that others can learn to do themselves. Where did they go? The crystal showed her images of distant galaxies, places where younger civilizations were just beginning to reach for the stars. Where guardians are most needed. Dr. Kulmora left the ancient facility with evidence that would force the galaxy to confront an uncomfortable truth. She shared her discoveries with the emergency council that had formed to address the ongoing crises. The reaction was exactly what she had expected. Impossible, declared ethereal prime consciousness Zorthek. Humans could not have been maintaining galactic infrastructure. Our scans show no evidence of this supposed network. Because you've been looking for complex systems, Dr. Kulmora replied. The network uses simple principles that appear to be natural processes, gravitational adjustments that look like stellar drift, atmospheric changes that seem like normal weather, economic fluctuations that appear to be market forces. General Thokmar of the Kethvar slammed his fist on the table. You're saying humans were secretly controlling our entire civilization? Not controlling. Maintaining. Like gardeners tending plants or doctors treating patients. They kept the natural systems healthy so that your civilizations could grow. Captain Vex Thul, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. It makes sense. The human tactical advisors never told us what to do. They just asked questions that helped us see solutions ourselves. Exactly, Dr. Kulmora said. They didn't control decisions. They created conditions where good decisions were more likely. Felnara, who had been studying the economic data, looked up with tears in her golden eyes. The universal credit. The stability equations weren't just mathematical models. They were designed to account for how different species actually behave, not how economic theory says they should behave. The evidence was overwhelming, but accepting it meant admitting that everything the galaxy thought it knew about itself was wrong. Species that had considered themselves advanced were forced to confront the possibility that they had been children playing with toys, while responsible adults quietly prevented them from hurting themselves. Even if this is true, Zorthek's thoughts grew colder. It changes nothing. The humans are gone. We must adapt without them. But we're failing, Vex Thul pointed out. The war with the Mercanti has cost millions of lives. The plague is spreading. Colonies are dying. Then we learn faster, Zorthek replied. Or we accept that some species are not ready for galactic civilization. Dr. Kulmora activated the holographic displays she had recorded from the crystal. The images showed the galaxy, as it really was, a vast network of interconnected systems where every action affected everything else. Worlds that seemed independent were actually supported by flows of energy and resources that crossed thousands of light years. This is what the humans saw, she said. Not separate species competing for resources, but one living system where everyone's survival depends on everyone else's health. The delegates stared at the displays in silence. For the first time, they could see the hidden connections that made their civilizations possible. They could see how human maintenance of The network had prevented cascading failures that would have destroyed entire star systems. "How many worlds are we going to lose before we learn to work together?" Dr. Kulmora asked. It was a question that would echo through the galaxy as species began the slow, painful process of learning to be their own guardians. But in the depths of space, in frequencies that only the most sensitive instruments could detect, a message pulsed outward from the abandoned human territories. It was brief, coded in mathematics that would take the galaxy decades to decode. "The garden grows. We are proud." Somewhere among distant stars, humanity was watching, and despite everything their former neighbors were going through, the humans were smiling. 2 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy had been forced to grow up. The change was visible everywhere, written in the wreckage of failed ambitions and the slow construction of something new. Half the Galactic Council chambers stood empty, their seats representing species that had either withdrawn into isolation or been consumed by conflicts they could no longer navigate. But in the remaining sections, something unprecedented was happening. Representatives were actually talking to each other. Quintal, the young mercanti trader who had broken his species embargo to save Kethvar refugees, now wore the diplomatic insignia of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. The organization had grown from a handful of individuals to a network spanning dozens of worlds, all focused on the radical idea that different species could work together without human mediation. "The food shipment from Altair Prime will reach the Zephyrian quarantine zones in 6 days," he reported to the Mixed Species Council that had replaced many formal government functions. "The Kethvar fleet will provide escort protection through the contested zones." Captain Vexathul, who had lost his military rank but gained something more valuable, nodded from across the table. "My ships are ready. We've developed new protocols for mixed species crews. Turns out warriors and traders make good partners when they're both trying to save lives." The Zephyrian plague still raged across 17 systems, but its spread had slowed. Not because of some miraculous cure, but because species were finally learning to share information and resources. The breakthrough had come when Dr. Kulmora convinced her fellow ethereals to stop trying to create perfect vaccines and instead study the simple approach the humans had used. "The human method works because it's not trying to be perfect," she explained to the Emergency Medical Council. "It adapts to the virus instead of trying to force the virus to adapt to it. It's humble medicine instead of arrogant medicine." The new vaccines were crude by ethereal standards, but they worked. More importantly, they could be produced by any species with basic biochemical knowledge, making treatment available to worlds that could never have afforded advanced ethereal medical technology. Felnara had lost most of her personal fortune in the universal credit collapse, but she had gained something that surprised her: purpose. Working with economists from a dozen different species, she was helping to develop a new financial system based on principles the humans had tried to teach for centuries. "Instead of maximizing profit, we maximize stability," she explained to a gathering of mercanti traders who were still struggling to understand the concept. "Instead of competing against other species, we create systems where everyone benefits from everyone else's success." "But what about profit?" asked an elderly trader whose golden fur had gone gray with worry. "There's plenty of profit," Felnara assured him, "but it's sustainable profit. The kind that doesn't disappear overnight because someone in another galaxy changed their economic policy." The hardest lessons were being learned in the ruins of failed civilizations. 3 entire star systems had collapsed completely, their populations scattered as refugees among more stable worlds. The Nexus Federation had torn itself apart in civil wars that might have been prevented by simple diplomacy. The Outer Rim Collective had simply gone silent, their worlds dark and lifeless. But even in the wreckage, seeds of hope were growing. The world of Haven, built specifically to house refugees from the collapsed systems, beings from dozens of species were learning to live together in ways that would have been impossible during the human era. Without the subtle human influence that had kept species politely separated, they were forced to actually understand each other. The Zonari children play the same games as Altarian children, observed teacher Kesiara, a hexapod educator who ran the integrated schools. They just use different rules. When you teach them to see the similarities instead of the differences, they figure out how to play together. It was a lesson that adults were slowly learning too. The great irony was that the species were becoming more human in their absence. The qualities that had made humans such effective guardians, patience, cooperation, thinking in systems rather than competing interests, were spreading throughout the galaxy out of pure necessity. On the military front, the endless wars were ending not through victory, but through exhaustion. The Kethavar-Mercanti conflict had burned itself out when both sides realized they were fighting over resources that were worthless if everyone was dead. The peace negotiations had taken 8 months, conducted entirely by non-human mediators, who had learned to ask the simple questions that humans had once asked. What do you actually want? What are you afraid of? How can we both get what we need? General Thokmar, who had lost 3/4 of his fleet in the pointless war, found himself working with former enemies to establish the galaxy's first interspecies peacekeeping force. Humans made it look easy because they understood something. We didn't, he told his mixed crew of Kethvar warriors and Mercanti logistics specialists. War is what happens when people stop talking to each other. Peace is what happens when they start talking again. The Deep Space Monitoring Network was slowly coming back online, maintained by a cooperative effort between multiple species. The work was harder without human expertise, but it was also more resilient because no single species controlled it. Dr. Kulmora had become the galaxy's leading expert on what she called guardian principles, the simple but powerful ideas that humans had used to maintain galactic stability. She traveled between worlds, teaching other species how to think like gardeners instead of conquerors. A garden needs many different kinds of plants, she would tell her audiences. Some are tall, some are short. Some need lots of water. Some need very little. The gardener's job is not to make all plants the same, but to create conditions where all plants can thrive together. Her most important discovery had been in the abandoned human archives. Hidden in routine maintenance logs and bureaucratic reports, she found evidence of threats that humanity had quietly prevented. Asteroid collisions that had been deflected without anyone noticing. Solar flares that had been predicted and prepared. 4. Even potential invasions by hostile species from outside the galaxy that had been diplomatically resolved before they became conflicts. For 200 years, humans were fighting a war that the rest of us never knew was happening, she reported to the reformed Galactic Council. They were protecting us from dangers we couldn't even see. The revelation had shaken even the most arrogant species. The ethereals, who had always considered themselves the galaxy's natural leaders, were forced to confront the possibility that they had been protected children playing in a garden that someone else had been maintaining. But perhaps the most profound change was in how species related to each other. Without human mediators to smooth over differences, they had been forced to actually understand their neighbors. The process had been painful, marked by misunderstandings and conflicts, but it had also created deeper connections than had ever existed before. Young beings who had grown up during the crisis were different from their parents. They spoke multiple languages, understood multiple cultures, and thought naturally in terms of cooperation rather than competition. They were, in many ways, becoming the humans that the galaxy had lost. We're not trying to replace the humans, explained Zara, a young Altarian who led one of the new interspecies youth organizations. We're trying to become the people they believed we could be. In the deepest archives of the ancient Guardian facility on Kepler 438b, Dr. Kulmora found one final message from humanity. It had been left in the crystal database, programmed to activate only when the galaxy's crisis had passed a certain threshold of resolution. The message was simple, recorded by Ambassador Sarah Chen shortly before humanity's departure. To our friends in the galaxy, we know this transition will be difficult. Change always is. But we have watched you for 2 centuries, and we have seen your potential. You are capable of wisdom, cooperation, and love that surpasses even our own. We did not leave because we lost faith in you. We left because we had faith that you would find your own way to become the guardians your galaxy needs. The architects left us the same gift long ago, the chance to grow up. Now we pass that gift to you. Take care of each other. Take care of the worlds that sustain you. And remember that the greatest strength is not the power to control others, but the wisdom to serve something greater than yourself. We are proud of you. We always have been. The message included coordinates, not to where humanity had gone, but to worlds where other young species were just beginning to reach for the stars. The invitation was clear. When the galaxy was ready, when it had learned to be its own guardian, it too could join the great work of shepherding younger civilizations toward maturity. As Dr. Kulamora transmitted the message throughout the galaxy, she smiled with an expression that would have been perfectly recognizable to any human who had ever watched a child take their first steps. The galaxy was growing up, and its absent parents were watching with pride from wherever their next adventure had taken them. Somewhere among distant stars, humanity was tending new gardens, asking new questions, and quietly making sure that other young civilizations would